Steve Frowine is a self-proclaimed plant nerd. Ever since he was a kid, he's loved plants. I started helping my neighbor, Ms. Connell, weed her garden when I was a youngster, says Steve. I've had my nose in plants ever since. His dad, a successful attorney in Portsmouth, Ohio, wasn't sure that horticulture was a field that his son should pursue. So to test him, he got young Steve a job with a local florist, instructing the owner to pay him a Pepsi a day and work him to death. He said it backfired. Steve loved the job so much that he was bent on studying horticulture in college and making it his career. His fixation with orchids started in junior high when his dad brought him one back as a present from Florida. Sounds like your dad really had a good heart. Now Steve for a while Steve resided in Mexico, where he grew a wide range of orchids outdoors. He's now in North Carolina. He has little patience for plants that don't bloom, but not so with orchids. I've been growing a division of a lady slipper orchid for 26 years. It finally bloomed for the first time this winter, he says. Now that's obsession. Steve's resume reads like a list of the top organizations and companies in the United States horticultural world. He has worked at the Missouri Botanical Garden, the National Tropical Botanical Garden in Hawaii, Cleveland Botanical Garden, Pittsburgh Civic Garden Center, W. Ackley Burpee, White Flower Farm, Evora, International Garden Products, and Dutch Gardens. He's written articles for most major gardening magazines and has been on the board of the Garden Writers Association, the National Gardening Association, and the American Association of Botanical Gardens in Arboretum. He's also on the visiting committee of the Longwood Gardens. He has written 4 orchid books, Orchids for Dummies. Then his books are over here that you can buy a copy yourself and get it signed for that matter, which is published by Wiley, and Fragrant Orchids, Miniature Orchids, and a book called Moth Orchids, The Complete Guide to Phalaenopsis. Through all these changes in years in horticulture, the one area that has remained constant is Steve's love of growing orchids. Now the passion for orchids has caught up with amateur and professional gardeners alike. Steve, you're on.
Great shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, people comment about this shirt. This was a present from my wife when we were in Mexico. And if you look in the book, my Orchids for Dummies book, in the center where the color plates are, they were taken from those pictures. They were done by hand, no machine work. This all done by hand. Looking at the pictures, and read this Mexican lady in this casita. It was incredible what she could do. So anyway, I thank you very much for having me here. I'll just as a side note to what Jan was talking about, the 26-year-old orchid that took me a flower. I gave a talk to a group and I mentioned that to them, and it was an older group, but they said, I'm not even starting this hobby. 26 years, I'm not waiting 26 years. Well, you know, I don't wait 26 years anymore. Because I'm pretty optimistic about life, but I'm not banking on 26 more years. So for me, I get plants that's in flower. So anyway, I thank you very much for having me here, and John and Janet actually put me up in their place, so I appreciate that. We had a nice dinner, and it's fun to be back here again. And we were in Cincinnati yesterday, and the most important thing we had to do in Cincinnati was see Fiona. My wife said we have to see Fiona, have to see that. The hippo was born so that was a highlight for Sasha. I was pretty good because she puts up with these talks and she's heard the same stuff so long. I give her credit. That's Sasha. She's my Vanna White on the orchid books, and she can pull them up for you and do the other. So I brought. Unfortunately, with orchid books, they're out of print very quickly, and so a lot of mine are out of print now. So I made PDFs. So if you have a computer that you can read the PDFs, then you can print them or print them yourself or cut and paste them. So anyway, thank you for having me here today. I also want to thank Jan for going above and beyond. This is actually the first time I've given this particular talk. I was talking with Jan. We were talking about what would be most useful to an orchid society. And I found most of the time what happens when people give talks is they show a lot of beautiful pictures of flowers, and then at the very end they tell you a little bit of how to grow them. So I thought we'd just turn the whole thing upside down and do the whole thing about culture, all the different aspects of culture. And there's no pretty pictures of orchids in here. It's going to tell you how to grow orchids. Now, of course, everybody has different ways of growing them. And as long as you're successful, I'm not going to, don't be following anything I say if you're totally successful. But most of us have some things that are not working right. So, and I think, as was mentioned before, there's kind of a yin-yang thing going here. All these things affect each other. You know, if you have high temperature, you need to have high humidity. If you have low temperatures, you water less. If you have a higher light, all these things are interrelated. And so we're going to try to relate those things to you today. And I guess I'll stand around this thing. I might take this mic off. But so we're going to go through the most important critical factor in growing orchids is light. And it is most commonly the most limiting factor when you're growing them. So well, that's what we're going to talk about is light. Is my battery dead?
That might not be turned on the side.
What's that?
The switch on the side of it.
Oh, it got turned off. You know what? John did that on purpose. He turned that off on me. Yeah, save the battery, but speakers are real trouble. So I'm glad, thank you very much for turning it off, John. So I said, you know, when I go to the talks, I never really worry about the presentation. I worry about the visuals. You know, I've been to places, I've gone through so many things like that where things don't work and drives you crazy. I was in Las Vegas, I'd given a talk, I had everything set up like it's perfect, and somebody unplugged the projector. You didn't want to do that. You can't just turn it back on. It's got to cool off. So I gave the whole talk. Boy, this was a beautiful red orchid. Just think about that. It had this beautiful lip, and you can't describe the orchid. It didn't work very well. But anyway, thank you very much, John, for helping me out. This is not my place. This isn't my place with Black Ball. This is what we would like to have. But this is Longwood Gardens. And you know, when you've got thousands and thousands of orchids, you can make displays like this. You know, I bet you this is a frequent thing when friends come out that are just into orchids, that come out, here you have orchids. I want to see your orchids, right? And they come out. Where are the flowers? You know? They think everything's going to be a flower once, don't they? Or everyone's going, oh man, I can't wait to see orchids. Well, you want to look a lot of green stuff, you know? So you got to have a lot of orchids to be able to have enough that's in flower all the time to look like this. Most of us are facing more of a situation like this. We're growing on the windowsills, we're growing under lights, and that's what we're going to talk about. And without enough light, the orchids will only grow foliage and they won't flower. And that's the most critical thing with flowering is light. Also, if you have a sunny window, the other problem that a lot of the windows have is the sills. The windowsills are so narrow that you can't put any pots on them. And so what I found is I got that kind of laminate material that they use for putting decking, but this is white. That white plastic laminate material, if you put it on there, you can just screw it right into your windowsills with stainless steel screws, and it'll never warp, it'll never rot. It gives you a permanent extended sill. You can have twice or three times the width of your sill, so it makes it easier to put the plants there. This was an area that I had in Connecticut, and the reason that we moved from Connecticut was right back here. This stuff right here. Way too much of that stuff. Way too much. And when I moved there, I worked for White Flower Farm, and we moved into this area, and I didn't put it together that there was a ski lodge that wasn't too far away. I didn't put that together. That means they have a lot of snow. So we moved from Connecticut to Mexico. And part of it was when I came in from one day shoveling snow and I was covered with ice, and our dogs were laying in front of a wood fireplace, and I said, there's really something wrong here. They're living a much better life than we are. And I'd like to make some changes. So that's when we moved to Mexico, and I must admit it was quite nice to have that change. When you're thinking about light for your orchids, it can be a combination of artificial light and natural light. I mean, it's just the volume and the quality of light. That's what we're after. We're going to give you some tips on how to measure the quality of light as well as the quantity of light. Both of those are very important criteria. And this was an area that one of the ladies that was growing orchids in Minnesota. So if you feel bad about not having enough light in Kentucky, think about Minnesota in the winter. And even in Nashville where we are, you know, whenever I got depressed about how cold it was, we had friends in Minnesota, I checked Minneapolis. You're always going to feel better after that. I mean, it's like 20 below in that place. I don't know how they could take it. But anyway, she was able to grow orchids in the winter with supplementary light. And there wasn't much natural light during the winter, better believe. The window orientation when you're growing in windowsills is very important for you to take note of, you know, because you've got these 4 different exposures. The south is the brightest, and then you have the east, and then the east is next, and then west is about the same brightness, but it's a lot hotter. And the north really can't grow very many orchids in the north because it's just not enough light. The other thing is how far you place the plants away from the window makes a big difference. Of course, a lot brighter here. As you go in, it drops off quickly. You can also diffuse the light with curtains or kind of thin material. But this gives you an idea. Now, some people, I know this doesn't apply to you guys because I know you're good growers and you can really think about this. But some person asked me, how do you know which is each window? How do you know? That's where the sun rises, right? If the sun comes up there and it comes in through that window in the morning, that means it's east. If you have the light coming in late in the afternoon, that means it's west. If you're having sunlight for most of the day, that means it's south. And then north means it's usually diffused light most of the time. You hardly ever get any direct light direct sunlight in window. And also the bow windows are handy that way because they give you light from the front, back, and side. So, but you know the window greenhouse that you sometimes see advertised, they look very good in magazines, but I have not had good experience with them because unless they're really thermopane windows, they heat up very quickly and they cool down very quickly. And I really don't think that's a very good investment to get at that. A bow window is different because it's insulated, the glass is insulated, it's much heavier duty, and it's opening to the room so that it moderates that temperature. But the window greenhouse, I've power boiled a lot of stuff in those things. The other thing is you got to figure out what time of the day, with light, the angle of the light, because it's different times of the day. You've got in the morning it's low in the sky, and in the evening, in the afternoon it's high in the sky. And then when it's winter, it's even lower in the sky during the early time. So you have to pay attention to the light as it pertains throughout the year, because sometimes during the winter, something you grow in the south window might be too hot in the summer. You might have to move to the east window. So you have to watch the plants, and we'll show you how to know if the plants are getting enough light or not. Another thing that I did on one of the windows is you can get these clear acrylic containers that are on a wire that you can't really see, and it gives you then 4 times the space in the same window. And makes them easy to grow that way. When we're measuring light, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. One of the simplest of all is just using your hand to see what kind of diffused light pattern you have. You know, if you have a really strong light, you're going to have like a light maybe for a vanda or even some of the cattleyas and lagleas. It's real strong. Use of delineation. You can see the clear marks of the fingers. And the medium light is more like what you'd probably do for Phalaenopsis and some of the Oncidiums and Ladyship orchids. And then the low light, where it's really diffused, you can barely see a shadow. That's an indication. That's probably not going to be a good sight for most of your plants, except for ferns and foliage plants, things like that. You can also measure your light, and in your handout there, you know, thanks to Jan to run this off, there's a lot of detail in this handout. I spent a lot of time on doing the handouts because, you know, it's hard to remember all this stuff. You can't write it all down. But the light meters, you can either buy a light meter or you can get it free. That connection, which is in your handout, those are 2 programs that are free, light meters. They're with your phone. And it measures your general light intensity, so you don't even have to buy a light meter. Now, there's different ways of thinking and about light. I mean, this is one way where you're measuring the lumens. That's the approximate intensity of the light. And then more sophisticated ways of doing it are measuring the photosynthetic area radiation, which is called PAR. You know, I think, we don't need to make things that complex. We really don't need to. I mean, guys have a thing. I mean, my wife's the same. We always like more gizmos, you know? We like to have more gizmos. But, you know, the truth is that the plants themselves will tell you what's right. If you have a light meter like this, or one you get on the line, that's usually going to give you enough information. The PAR meters, they call them, it actually measures the amount of light that's used in photosynthesis. But what I found is if you get the right, if you're using natural light, or if you use the fluorescent lights we're going to talk about, they're already producing the right quality of light. So really the volume is the most important thing, that you get the brightness that you need to keep the plants growing well. So you can get the other meter if you want. I've done it, and I haven't really seen much difference between just doing a simple light meter and a PAR meter. This is what it's called, photosynthetic active radiation. And it measures it technically between 400 and 700 nanometers. And that just means that's the spectrum of light that's most used in photosynthesis. It's a nice thing to dwell on, but it's not really necessary. To just give you an idea, this is what a PAR meter looks like, and it is more expensive than a regular meter, but they're not too bad. The leaf shapes of the plants will give you a good clue to whether the plants, what the plant requires, what the orchid requires. In general, the foliage is really thick and hard and round, requires brighter light than is wide and thin. So that gives you some indication of what the light requirements are. The other thing is, the plant itself tells you it's receiving enough light. If the plant leaves are floppy, they're normally more stiff. If they're floppy, that's an indication of not enough light. If the leaves are further apart on the stem, the internodal length, if they get further apart than they were when you originally purchased it in the flower, that's an indication not enough light. So that tells you, and if it doesn't flower, that's another indicator. I think that actually too much light you can give where you get some burn, and we've got some examples of burn on the table. I really appreciate bringing those in so you can see firsthand what burn looks like. You know, that's educational. That's I really appreciate that. So what happens with these burns is that it's not really too much light. It's too much heat from the light. So the leaves have a surface on them, like an epidermis. It's like a plastic covering almost with little holes in it. And so when the light hits that, it heats it up underneath there like it would if it was a plastic bag. And so that heat causes the tissue underneath that epidermis to burn, to dehydrate. And that's what causes these circular burns. Because you can find in commercial greenhouses that have a high volume of air movement, that they can be in a lot brighter situation than you might have at home. And when you're looking for that, just always feel the leaves. The leaves should never be more than warm. If they're getting hot, then that's going in the danger zone. You should be able to feel that with your hands. So the right amount of light. The plants are stocky. Their internodal length, the distance between the leaves, is short. The foliage is light green for the most part, not dark green. If the leaves are dark green, what happens in a plant is if it's in a lower light area, the chloroplasts, the green things in there, the cells, they compensate for that lower light by producing more of those chloroplasts. So it gets greener and greener. So the plant will survive, but it won't flower when it's real dark green. Now there's variations within orchids, and sometimes some of the Phalaenopsis example that are pink or purple, have a purple underside to the leaf, so the top of the leaf looks darker green, but it's actually because of the purple that's underneath it that makes it darker. So in general, lighter green is what you're after for most orchids. If the orchid is not flowering at its normal time, if you had it year after year, that's an indicator probably too that it's not in enough light. If the flower is washed out, if it comes out and just doesn't have the color that it had before, that's another indicator, not enough light. The leaves should be more roundish than long and narrow. Again, compare that to the original plant. When you look at the plant when you bought it and it was in flower, look at the shape and the width of that leaf. And you should be replicating that. So it should be wide and not as long instead of narrow and thin. When we use artificial lights, there's a lot of confusion with artificial lights. And You can get T5s, you can get the LEDs. And I would say today, LEDs are what everybody's after because they're using a lot less electricity. And they can be very good, but you've got to be careful because all LEDs are not the same. There are some that are much brighter than others. And it's no good to have an LED that you got a good deal on if it's not giving enough light or the quality light you want to grow the plants well. So we'll look at some of the differences in these LEDs. I want to tell you that, you know, a lot of people get worried about orchids. I've never been in a group where actually it's a badge of courage for the number of orchids you killed. You know, don't you think? See, how many did you kill? 10. I killed 15. You know, well, you have to remember, you didn't kill them; it died. That's a big difference. It wasn't your fault. It was weak. So you just kind of cleaned out the gene pool. You did a favor to the orchid. So keep that in mind when next time one croaks on you. When we're looking at the growth lights, we're trying to compare the ones. These are the basic types you have. You have the HID, which are those great big lights they use in shopping malls and stuff. And they're really used a lot for orchids that are really tall because they require such, and highlight orchids like the vandas. That's a very popular thing to use for those. Or if you have orchids that have really tall spikes on them and you still want enough light to get the bottom leaves, the LEDs have been popular. The high pressure sodium is a type of a high intensity discharge, but the light is kind of yellow, and so to me I don't like those much because they make the flowers discolored, they make your flesh look gray, and also they're very hot. So then you have the LEDs, which we talked about. LEDs have the advantage, I guess, of being very long life. You see that with the lifespan. But you just need to know that the ones you have are very efficient, and we'll talk about that a little later. Then you have the T8s and the T5s, and these just means, you know, the common ones are T12s, and they're about that big around. The T8s are about that big around, and then the T5s are about that big around. So the number is just the circumference of the bulb, and so the smaller the number, the smaller the bulb. T5s, especially the T5HO, high output, are probably the ones that a lot of people are using today because they give out a lot amount of light. I mean, you can grow small vandas under T5s, no problem. So I say the toss-up is between T5s and LEDs. One thing that's nice about the T5s and the LEDs is that they now are making LEDs that are in a tube that can replace a T5. So if you get T5 bulbs and you've used it for a while, and now you say, well, I like to try the LEDs now, you can buy replacements that just slip right in the T5 jump. So I would say what the situation is, T5, the LEDs are getting better, brighter, and cheaper. But presently, today, is still most economical to start with T5s when you really measure all the different qualities that come with it. So that's usually my choice, but the LEDs are coming on quickly. The advantage of the T5s is that they're low initial cost. I mean, the bulbs are not expensive now, especially if you look into some of the suppliers I put in your list. You can get them for $5 or $6 a bulb. Used to be at $25. The LED bulbs are the same, are like $25. So it takes a bit to get the difference in saving energy when you have to pay a bunch for a bulb. And also the LEDs, the ones that are in the strip like that, what happens if a couple of those diodes go out? You can't replace the diodes. So the bulbs are readily available. I mean, you can get the T5s at Home Depot or anywhere you want to drive. I mean, so they're really easy to find. Their flexibility in the light spectrum, which we'll talk about later, they have an even light distribution. It's more or less even. I mean, toward the 6 inches on both sides of the bulb is lower light intensity at the very center, but it's fairly evenly distributed. It's got a high CRI, they call it, which is color rendition index. And what that means is that the higher the number, the color rendition index, the higher the light is like natural light. So you can get the fluorescent bulbs that have CRI of like in the 90s. So that means it's really close to natural sunlight. And if you go to like the cool whites, they're way far away from a 90-some CRI. So you get a high CRI. They have a lower heat output, which don't burn the plants, and they're very economical to use. The ones that are most suitable for growing under light, so our plants that tend to be somewhat compact in habit, like with a medium light requirement of anywhere from 500 to 2,000 foot candles. I would say most of it's probably more like 1,000 to 2,000 foot candles. Ones like lady support, paths, phalaenopsis, ceilings, and even ones that require higher light intensity, like the vans, but they're shorter. They naturally don't grow as tall. Because the problem is with light gardening is that when you go half a distance, it's 1/4 of the light. It's geometric drop off. So if you can't go too far with fluorescent bulbs, they'll lose their volume of light very dramatically when they're very far away from the tubes. So if you get a compact plant, like some of the Miltonias or even the Vandas that are small, if you're only this far away, the difference between the top and the bottom is not that significant in light intensity. Get up here, it's hugely significant. And then what will happen is your new growth will be all stretched and won't flower well. So that's why you want to have more compact growing plants. Okay. The compact fluorescents are okay. They're kind of becoming more outdated as you're getting the LEDs and others. They can be handy for like spotlights or supplemental lights to make things nice. They do have ones that have full spectrum light, which is kind of nice. So you can match the light properly. And then this is what we were talking about the 3 different types of bulbs: the T12, the T8, and T5. Now I think T8 was a step up from T12. You know, T12 was supposed to be phased out in American markets years ago. It's just like, I don't know if any of you guys remember, but back in the olden days, they said US would be on metric in 10 years. Remember that? Yeah, well, so much for that, you know. So that's kind of what's happened with the T12s. They were supposed to be phased out a long time ago because they're the most inefficient form of fluorescence. So they created the T5s to be more efficient, that is more light per watt, and then T8s, and then they went up to T5s. So T5s will be, there are such things as T2s, but I think T5s will kind of remain the standard. And if we look at the difference here, just the T5s and T8, if we look at the lumens for T12, well, the medium lumens is pretty good for that, or we look down in here, but you're also having more electricity for what you're getting. Also, lumen maintenance, that's real important. Look how fast the T12s drop off in their light. They lose that light much faster. They lose the intensity much faster. And the T5s and the T8s last a lot longer. And also look at this difference in your CRI, your closest to natural light. So those are all factors that are important. So these are the advantages. I think T5, the biggest advantage is it's most efficient. It's a brighter light source you have. And you know, even if you grow plants like Phalaenopsis or lady spores that don't require a huge amount of light, the nice thing about T5s, they can be a lot further from the lights, which makes it easier to grow because you get the watering in there, you can check out the bugs. And so I love to go with the T5s. I don't really think T8s are worth the trouble because they're kind of a transition and so quality light, I would say it's really, the thing is really just T5s are a better choice all the way through. And this is comparing all of them. Now if you look at the T5s and the T5s and T5HO, look at the lumens on this, 5,000 lumens. And this is 2850 for a T8. So you're having much higher volume of light. I mean, you're putting more electricity into it. But remember that the T5s, the T12s before we said were 48 watts. This is just, you know, not that many watts more, but vastly much more light for growing. And the temperature, they're a little bit warmer, the T5HOs, but again, because you can grow the plants further away from the lights, it still works out. I've never had burn on them when I'm using them that way. The other thing is with the older light fixtures, they came with a magnetic ballast, if you ever see them, and those things buzz, and they drive you crazy. They just load like that. Oh my God! After a while, it goes nuts. So they come up with better ballasts, electronic ballasts. They don't buzz at all. They're quick to start. They burn at a lower temperature. They're just vastly superior. So if you're going to get any light fixture, make sure it has electronic ballast, not a magnetic ballast. Okay, when you look at the cost from the very beginning, it really looks like you're going to save all this electricity with LEDs, and it's true. But you just have to make sure that you're getting enough light with those LEDs. And it doesn't matter how much you save if it doesn't produce enough light. The light quality can be the same as long as you're careful about it. We're going to talk about what do you look for in a lamp. That is, if you're going to buy LEDs, or you're going to buy HIDs, or you're going to buy fluorescents, you still look for these three criteria. Don't be worried about all the marketing mumbo jumbo. This stuff is great for growing plants. Look at these three criteria. Number one, the CRI. And if you can't find it from the store you're buying it from, look it up online from the manufacturer. Find out the CRI. The higher the number it is, the more the light's going to be natural color. Color temperature, that's in Kelvin. That's what they do. Like the color temperature between 5,000 and 6,500 is the color temperature of natural sunlight. So you want to get bulbs that are within that range of 5,000 to 6,500 Kelvin. And again, the manufacturer will tell you that. The last thing is lumen output per watt, because that's what you're paying for. So you want to see that you're getting a high amount of lumens per watt. So if you use these three criteria, that's all you need to do to compare things that don't seem to be the same. You can compare that. You can compare the LEDs with your HIDs, with your T5s, with your T8s, and then you'll see which one is the best deal for what you're trying to do to grow your plants. This is what we're talking about, color temperature. See, if we looked at the standard bulbs that you get, the warm white is 3,000 K. That's not in the range we're talking about. The cool white is better. The daylight bulbs are acceptable. In general, I think you can probably do better than the daylight, but that's not bad if you have to do that. But having cool white and warm white, the weird thing is, you think about warm white, you think that is red harder than blue? Is red harder than blue? If you have a gas unit and you're burning flame, when that flame is yellow warmer or cooler than the blue flame? Blue's hotter, right? So we think in our terms like blue is cool. Blue is cool, but actually blue with flames is hot. So that's why it gets a little confusing when you're trying to do things. In general, the light that we see in sunlight is usually on the cooler side. It's usually, during the middle of the day, during the morning and during the evening, it's got more yellow in it. During the middle of the day, it's got more blue in it. So this gives you an idea what we're talking about on color temperature. You can see here, if we go all the way up here to 9,000 is totally blue, and then we're looking at the range right in here. This is a sweet spot, the 5,000 to 6,500, and this is what you find in daylight. And then down here is a redder form of light. So we talked about what this was. And lumens is just a unit that's like foot candles, where you hold one candle up a foot away, that's 1 foot candle. And so that kind of relates to lumens, the amount of light you have for the area you're growing. So you're trying to get the highest lumen per watt. You want the highest CRI, preferably in the 90s. You want a Kelvin range between 5,500 and 6,500. See, how many people have heard this about lights? How many people have heard about these 3 criteria? So it's not real common. It's not real common knowledge. So most of the people just tell you their lights are the ones that grow plants. But let me stick with these 3. That's all you got to worry about. How much light is best? Yeah, I guess it matters which type of orchids you're growing, but you can grow everything under lights. It just matters how much electricity you want to burn, how many bulbs you want to burn. I mean, there was a lady in New York that she grew all her vandas in high intensity discharge lights. She had a garage, and she, I guess she didn't, she paid a lot for electricity, but she was able to grow beautiful vandas. In fact, she entered into the shows in New York, and she didn't win. But the major reason she didn't win is she wore red sequins during the day at the orchid show, and that was not really acceptable to the judge. And so she, after she lost several of them, she entered them under another name, and she won best of the show in New York. The judges were not happy about that at all, So every place got their politics, don't they? Okay, so these are the alternatives we were talking about. Sometimes the HID units, the nice thing about those is that if you do have really tall spiking orchids, it does give you a high volume of light that you can use to bloom your orchids. Some people have more than one light unit. They use the kind of carts that they use for growing most of the time, and then when the orchids spike up, they get an HID unit, so it allows them to still provide enough light while the plant's starting to elongate with the flowering spikes. So they can create an indoor greenhouse, there's no doubt about that. I mean, they will provide enough light, and the higher the wattage you have, the larger the spread of the light. It'll still give you growing area, like they said, 5 to 7 feet high, 12 by 12 feet. They have it all calculated out. So if you have really high spiking orchids or ones that require a lot of light, like the vandas, sometimes the HIDs are a better solution for you. The compact fluorescents, you actually can buy ones that are higher wattage that are very similar to the HIDs. They're really large compact fluorescents, and they come in different colors of light. So with lower light orchids like the Phalaenopsis, flippers, I would say you're still better off. To me, I still like a 4-tube fixture instead of a 2-tube fixture because it distributes the light wider. And then what you can do if you're growing lower light orchids under bright light, you can lift the lights higher, and that'll give you a larger growing space at an intensity that's going to be useful for you. So I think in general, for most all your orchids, your T5s, four fixture T5s are going to work well for most everything you're going to be growing under lights. Orchids love humidity, and not outrageous amount of humidity. I mean, they do well, 50% or so of humidity, which actually we do too. I mean, during the winter, it's good for us to have that. At 50 to 60% humidity, you're not going to harm your books, your furniture, your wood. In fact, you'll keep your wood furniture from splitting. So it's beneficial for you too. Now, I was under the impression when I first grew orchids that you really had to have a steamy, and as a result, when I worked at Pittsburgh Pacific Garden Center, when I went there, I had an apartment that came with the place, and there was one spare room in there. And I said, are the utilities included with my rent? I said, yeah, okay. So I put high intensity discharge all over in that room, and then I jacked the humidity up until the walls peeled. But that's not necessary to do that. In fact, that real high humidity can cause a lot of disease problems. So you just try to get a humidity that is that's 50% or so is a nice ideal to have. And when you do that, it keeps the bugs from falling off from bud glass, and you don't have tips that are brown on your leaves, and the plants just have more vigor. So humidity is important, and but it doesn't have to be extreme. In fact, the Brits, when they first brought all these orchids from all parts of the world, they did stove houses, and they have steamy, and as a result, they lost most of the orchids. So that's not necessary. It's something you can't see, but you can feel. You can feel when you grow into a growing area, you can feel if it's got some humidity in it. I mean, it just makes you feel better. So ample humidity is important. for not stunting growth. Most homes during the winter, though, unless you do something about it, are the same relative humidity as a desert, literally. You know, they're like 15%. If you have a meter, you'll measure it. 15%, that makes your sinuses crack, your skin's crack. It's not healthy for you or the plants. So you want to try to increase the humidity. Now, if you're in a greenhouse situation, you can use like, you know, these type of units that really stay out mist. You can put them on a humidistat so you can regulate humidity. That's not very feasible for a home environment. It just creates too much moisture and can cause a lot of damage. What's more efficient is using room humidifiers. And you got two basic types. You got the ones that are evaporative coolers like this, where they blow the moisture over a wet surface and they blow it up in the air. The nice thing about these is they don't leave white calcium deposits everywhere because they humidify the air, but they don't put out a mist. But then the other group is this mist type ultrasonic, where ultrasonic then creates a mist and it actually puts a mist. Now I use this one in the garage area, but this one I use in the house where you don't have, where you want to worry about having calcium deposits on your walls. You can also just grow them on trays that, you know, over water. This is that material they use, acrylic lubricant that they use for diffusing light. And the windows, you get buy that at any of the home stores, cut it to shape, whatever container you're doing, and they'll keep the plants out of the water, but exposed to the water surface. Because a lot of times the most common thing people use are pebbles. They put pebbles on there, then put the plants on top of them, and that creates a mess. Because as soon as you water it, then the soil goes down into that tray and it becomes gunky and it's hard to clean. With this, what you do it is that the water is always exposed to the level. If you want, you can put a disinfectant like 409 or something in the water under it, and it'll keep all algae out. So you want to clean all the algae because it'll kill the algae, and it'll last a long time because when the water evaporates, it leaves the 409 or disinfectant behind because it evaporate. So that way you have no algae in your trays, and if you ever end up with any algae or junk in there from water in the plants, you just take them off and rinse it off and put it back. So it's much easier than pebbles and much superior to for humidity. Another thing you need is fresh air, movement of air. If we think about when we go outside, every day you go outside, even if you think it's slightly still, real still, you'll notice the leaves are just moving a little bit like that. And that makes a big difference to dry off the leaves and to keep from temperature stratification. Because if you're growing under lights and everything, it will be hotter here than down here just because of the natural evolution. But if you have air moving, it breaks up that stratification, keeps your temperature steady. And at the same time, it's important for disease control from getting the place too wet. Overhead fans are wonderful. They really can't be beat for moving the air. They move a large volume of air, but they don't do it at high velocity. So you're not blowing the leaves all over the place, but you're moving gradual amounts of air. And that's wonderful for that. And you can adjust the air based on your time of the season. In general, during the summer, you want the blades to be pushing down, and during the winter, you want them to be pushing up. Oscillating fans are a nice alternative too. What I did on mine, on the light card area, I laid the oscillating fan flat against the base of my growing area with, the light card had plastic around it, or actually vinyl. I put that fan inside the back of it there, so it blows up the back of the growing area and gives it nice ventilation that way. And it works great. And I mean, you can get fans like crazy at, the Goodwill and other places like that, especially when you go there during the winter. They've got slews of them, and it's a good way to save money on getting fans. The other thing you can use on individual shelf areas is the muffin fans. They use these a lot for computers, and they're very small, they're very quiet, and you can put them close to your areas to take out the hot air that's created by the lights. Orchids have different temperature requirements requirements. And if you look up, and then, if you get the name of the orchid you have, and just look it up and look which of the categories in, cool, warm, or intermediate, and then you can make sure you meet those qualifications. And if you're growing plants in a cart, you can have a 10-degree difference at least between the top and the bottom shelving on your light cart. So it gives you varying temperature ranges within one area. If the plants don't get enough heat, or the growth slows down very quickly. And you see that during the winter, whether they're growing in a greenhouse or under lights. If your temperatures drop, your growth rate is going to drop down too. And also with some of the plants, especially warm orchids like Phalaenopsis, if you get things below 60 and even 65 degrees, you're in real dangerous territory for Phalaenopsis because they really are susceptible to crown rot when it gets cold like that. So keep that in mind on what their temperature requirements are. If the hot temperatures are too high, it gets too hot, again, they'll inhibit growth, they'll stop growing, their flower buds will come up and they'll look like they're going to open and they turn brown from the bottom and they just keep on going up. Isn't that frustrating? You grow the damn thing for a whole year and all of a sudden, hey, it's going to bloom, and then drop, drop, drop. That can be from extreme temperatures, can be from poor root growth, it can be a lot of factors, but temperature can really contribute to it. Probably the biggest reason, the two biggest reasons that orchids don't flower is not enough light and no temperature differential between day and night temperatures. Because if you pay attention to your weather now or any time of the year, you look at what it is in the middle of the day, it might be 80 degrees, and I will drive to 60. That's a 20-degree differential. And that's what happens everywhere. When the sun goes down, the temperatures go down. And that's what the orchids are used to, and that's what triggers flowering on most of the orchids is temperature differential and enough light. Because the light produces energy for the plant, and that needs a lot of energy to flower, less energy to produce leaves. So temperature differential is very important. And if you're growing the things in a house where you have the temperature pretty much steady all the time, then think about putting them outside, in the fall, especially when the temperatures are dropping. Or put them closer to the window where their temperatures are colder than they are further into the house. So temperature differential is very important to get flowering. And you don't have to do it forever. You just go through that for maybe 3 weeks or so, that temperature differential. Once the buds have initiated, which you won't even see it, so it's a microscopic event, but once they start to initiate, then it doesn't matter. You grow them whatever temperature you want to. But to get them to initiate, you've got to respect that difference between day and night temperatures. And also paying attention to the growth cycle of plants. You can't change the way the plants naturally grow. I mean, with Phalaenopsis, you can manipulate them somewhat, but with Cattleyas and others, they have times of rapid growth during warm, sunny times, and even if you're growing under lights, it's warmer indoors during the summer than it is during the winter. So you have to respect the cycle. And the hard thing too is deciduous orchids, where in the fall they drop leaves. And I think the challenge between deciduous orchids is differentiating between dormancy and death. And they look a lot alike sometimes, dormancy and death. So I figure, unless you're really kind of having experience with growing dormant orchids, ones that are deciduous, it's probably not a good thing to start with because they are hard to tell about their cycles sometimes. If you have them in a natural situation, greenhouse, they will start to lose their leaves in the fall. They'll start to turn yellow. And then you think, oh my God, the thing's dying, but that's just a natural evolution. Rest versus death. Important thing to tell the difference in. Also, summering orchids outdoors is great. I did that in Connecticut. You do it here. It works really nice. The nice thing about putting them outdoors, you put them in a shade house like this, you can, that fresh air, and it just gives them a great boost. Now, of course, you open yourselves up to more insect problems too, because there are a lot more bugs outside. But it gives you a chance to clean out your indoor light growing area and grow them for a while outdoors. This is something that's really hard for people, but orchids really, like any plant, you gotta have some tough love here, If the plants are not performing, get rid of them. After a while, get rid of them. think is that if you follow this guideline, you'll always have beautiful orchids. And that is, anything that doesn't look good, you throw out. Then everything that's left really looks good. And if you go to growers, I've been other places and they say, boy, he's a really good grower. Because he said, you don't know how much I've thrown away. You know? And sometimes certain orchids just aren't meant for you. I mean, that's just the way it is. You all have certain conditions that are really good. And when you find orchids that grow really well for you within a certain group, whether it's Miltonias or Phalaenopsis, kind of work on those a lot more. You know, and when you buy your orchids, don't figure out before you buy them whether they're going to work well for you. You know, if you get rainforest plants from Ecuador, I mean, that's a challenge, you know, compared to Phalaenopsis or another plant that is adaptable to different light conditions. So I'm very keen on getting rid of the evidence, and I've had plenty in my trash cans. And it's depressing too, isn't it? It's depressing to look at these plants, because the problem is that once you damage your orchid, you've damaged it. Those leaves, if they're destroyed, they're not going to recover. And the new leaf's going to take a long time for that new growth to show. And once you've lost the roots hanging up, I mean, when the roots are gone, you're not going to save that thing. And don't buy the plants that are looking bad, cheap at a place. Buy the things really vigorous and in good shape. So this is a hard one, but it's one I find makes you feel a lot better. I'd rather have, 15 orchids that look good than 35 that look, half of them look bad. That's all. That's just a personal preference thing. And I always, and if the leaf is damaged or looks bad and it's on the end, cut it off.
Yes.
Then nobody knows. You cut it off, shape it that way, then it looks just like it was fine. So I don't know. That's what I feel about it. It's important. Blasted bud blast. That's when those buds turn around and fall off. That can be caused by a lot of different factors. We've got low humidity or hot air, overwatering, underwatering, poor root development. All these things are things you look for if you start to have a lot of problems. These are all on your list there. Watering is probably the most important aspect of growing orchids after having light. If they don't have enough water, or they have too much water, the roots are going to rot and you're going to have problems with growing things. So watch your watering. Watering variables, the type of pot, all these are variables you have to look at before you decide if you're watering properly. And I would say that the proven watering technique I have is just by weighing the pot. That is, you water it once when it's real dry, and then you lift it and you feel what the weight of it is. Then after a while, you wait till it gets dry and then you lift it. And after a while you do that, you'll get very adept at just feeling it. Because otherwise you can't do it, because you got potting mediums dry out differently, the humidity, the temperature varies. See, you can't tell somebody to water an orchid every 3 days. It just won't work. So the weighing method works very well for me, and I think and if you can't try to grow your plants in the same kind of media, these are all the different guidelines I give you for watering. I would say one thing important, water in the morning so it dries off by the afternoon. And under or overwatering will have very similar effects, because if you overwater, the root tips rot, they can't absorb water, so they dehydrate. If you underwater, the root tips dry up, they can't absorb water, so they dehydrate. So the way you can tell is if you overwater, if you knock it out of the pot, the roots will be rotted. If you've underwatered, you knock it out of the pot, the roots will be dried up. So that tells you what you're doing, and probably good for you then to repot. Make sure you don't use water that's coming out of water or water softener, because you substitute salt for calcium. Calcium for salt. And fertilizers aren't magic, remember, Be careful with your fertilizers, never use too much, follow directions. And the real general guideline, 1/4 teaspoon of fertilizer per gallon for water-soluble fertilizer will almost always work fine for you. 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. Most have some variation, but that's pretty close to it. And I mentioned some notes you can read over about what to look for your orchid fertilizer, but I think the most important thing is using the right volume and using it regularly, but weekly. And in your handout, they'll show you the different types, the granules, the slow release, the water soluble. Those are the most common. What is fertilizer burden? It's when you put too much fertilizer on the plant, and the fertilizer is a salt, and salts are deadly. So if you put too much salt on the plant, it'll cause the tips of the leaves to burn, and then you haven't done the plant any favor. So read the label, and never put more in than is recommended. So this is, again, what I don't have. This is kind of, I guess, what you have if you've really done a good job and go to heaven and all of a sudden, okay, see, I told you that those ones of you died, they went to heaven. So here they are, all the ones of you that died for you. So this is something you have to look forward to. So I hope I've given you some basic information. There's a lot of information here. I know it might be kind of an overload, but I've tried to do kind of an overview. And I think with a handout, hopefully you could look at that and, refresh your memory about what we talked about.